morning, everybody, and welcome to the first budget facilities meeting for Port Washington School District. So we have an agenda. Do we need an approval of the agenda? No, okay. Our first discussion item is to discuss the bid results.
Can we do a nomination of the budget chair first?
Do that first?
Yeah,
Sure.
please.
Could I have a nomination for the budget chair?
I would like to nominate Julie Epstein.
Second.
Do you accept?
Yes, I accept.
So moved, and now I turn.
Over the meeting to you.
Okay, fantastic.
You're in
Wonderful.
charge.
Thank you all for
Take
the,
it.
thank you for the nomination, and because we're trying to do this in an hour, we're gonna get right to business. As Kathy was saying, I would like to first take a moment to introduce Brian Graham, our Director of Facilities. For anyone here who doesn't know, he has replaced Jim Restano, and he is eager and ready to go. So right out of the bat, we are gonna talk about the bid results related to the 2015 bond for Sousa, Salem, and Manor Haven. And with that, Brian, we turn it over to you.
Okay. I don't have anything prepared. I guess there's anything that I should have prepared, but we did review the results. Obviously, we expected there to be some escalation related to the pandemic and supply chain issues. We have reviewed that, and we're proposing a couple of options. And I would ask Justin Stadio to speak.
And if I could just add a couple of things. In August, bids were opened, kind of like mid to late August, they were opened. Justin, our project manager, analyzed the bids. They did come in over what was budgeted originally. The project was done in 2015 is when the bid was actually voted upon. So of course you have certain escalation costs that would account for this overage. And also we've seen unprecedented escalation costs this year. So we do have some projects still left as part of this bond. So I've asked Justin, the architect, to come and speak to us about that, just to kind of give a refresher to everybody and then make some decisions of what we need to be cut.
Just, do we have the, I think we had asked in an email, how much the actual bond, I think it's kind of like a refresher, and I don't know if you have it, but the refresher on what the actual bond amount was, how much we've already spent, and how much is left, and then what projects do you have that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah. So the original bond budget was $69,877,198. Right now, we've spent about $56,999,934. There's about $7,582,439 left in projects. Of those projects are interior doors and electrical upgrades at Harry Palmer, district-wide air conditioning at Mount Haven Cafetorium, Salem Cafeteria, and the Sousa Auditorium. Relief air, fresh air upgrades to Guggenheim Elementary School, and then the addition, auditorium renovation, door replacement, again, some more fresh air relief renovations and electrical work at Sousa, toilet renovations at Manor Haven, and then there's a couple of an addition at South Salem and more fresh air relief work at South Salem as well. Those are the projects remaining.
The $7 million does not include the Sousa, Manor Haven, and Salem bid that just went in?
No, it does include that as well.
It does.
That bid came in over budget, as we had said. So what we had discussed as a group last week was possibly looking for different avenues of funding for some of the other projects, like the interior doors at Weber that could be maybe done through the security grant. The renovations of the toilet rooms at Manor Haven that could maybe be done over capital projects over the course of a couple of years. To then focus on the things that were kind of expressed at the beginning, some of the previous folks that were the most important, which were the additions, the steam rooms, and the AC in the common spaces like the auditoriums and the cafeterias.
One of the reasons that we highlighted those three projects specifically, the interior doors, we are seeing most door replacements being done, as Justin said, as part of a security project, where the hardware is being done at the same time as security hardening, and that does expedite the reimbursement if you do it through a capital project. If you do a security project, you can get that reimbursement quicker. And the electrical upgrades at Weber, what we're seeing even in the project you're bidding now is unprecedented supply chain issues with electrical infrastructure. To the point where some projects are not receiving bids. Contractors are not willing to bid on electrical work because there is such uncertainty when those materials will be available. So we feel by stalling that project, it might not be feasible anyway with the current supply chain.
Yeah, you're definitely not gonna get favorable pricing, as Brian had mentioned, given where we are currently, some of the, especially electrical components, that seems to be a really hard hit.
The lead time is a year plus, so with that uncertainty and that escalation, again, if contractors will bid on it at all, we feel that we would be able to do it at this point.
And also we've set up the capital reserve to address electrical upgrades as well, so we think that could be an area where it's all done at one time.
So what does that save us? So, I mean, I don't know, for me, I don't know if we can get something
Yeah,
written
can you
up. I
paint
don't
the
know.
picture on if we were to remove those three projects?
Yep. So if we were to remove those three projects from the bond and find different avenues of funding, it'll cover the overage of the three projects, the Manor Haven AC, Salem AC, the Sousa addition, electrical upgrades, auditorium renovation, which includes the AC. It would then put us about, I think, $20,000 under budget. And currently, right now, overall, with the bond, we are about 90,000 under budget as of mid-August.
Okay.
Can you just say again, which ones are we removing exactly? Is it
We
everything
are
you just said?
looking to absorb their budget into the overall current projects. It would be Weber Middle School interior doors, Weber Middle School electrical upgrades, and the Manor Haven toilet renovations.
So the interior doors at Weber are valued at like $225. The middle school electrical upgrade is $176. And then the Manor Haven toilet renovation is $650,000.
And what, and Guggenheim HVAC, you had mentioned, Kathy, to us as well, is that one of the ones that we're keeping, it sounds like,
Yes.
or we would keep that,
Yes.
and we'd be okay with it.
Because
Yeah.
that's the common space. Each building was promised a common space that could be air-conditioned.
And how would we do the Manor Haven
But
toilets?
Guggenheim didn't get their, oh, sorry, so Guggenheim didn't get their common space in their multi-purpose room addition, because they have their steam room addition,
They have
correct?
their steam room, they have a multi-purpose addition. They, this is for existing spaces that I guess need
They didn't get their capital.
exhaust and relief air upgrades.
Right, okay, so that's great, okay, because it was one like big main space in
Yes.
each school, and their multi-purpose space was their big main
And their
space, and then,
cafeteria
and their
as
cafeteria.
well, yeah.
And their cafeteria got it as well, okay,
But
great.
we're also not talking about eliminating any of these projects. We're
Just
talking about
redistributing.
pulling it out of the bonds
Correct.
and paying for it in the
Right.
next
Right,
Right.
right.
And then, again, just to make sure I'm very clear, you talk about the cafetoriums for Manor Haven, Salem, and Sousa, right, the air conditioning in those spaces. We also still are just independently leaving the Salem, and I know Salem, Emily kind of asked this, I'm just saying it out loud. The Salem extension is still on the table,
Oh,
it's
yes.
being bid, it's not part of this, it's
Yeah.
all covered within everything that we
Yeah,
have, so that's not the issue.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so just a reallocation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just one thing, I just want to, one small correction is that the Sousa's cafeteria is not getting these seats, the auditorium.
Oh, the auditorium,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's the common space that was chosen to receive the AC.
Thank you.
Just Manor Haven toilets, how are they going to be fixed? So we took it out of the bond, how are we gonna put it?
We'd probably break them
Doing
up
it
into
ourselves?
smaller projects and do it through the capital fund in phases.
That you anticipated my question, Emily, because the other two would be security projects.
No,
Only the interior
Interior doors would be a
doors.
security project.
The electrical upgrades are through the capital reserve.
Electrical.
And those are all the other ones would be capital projects.
All right, so the electrical is through the capital reserve, but the interior doors, we think we could actually even get reimbursed more quickly by doing this as a security update.
And Justin, can you just
How are
talk-
you gonna do the Manor Haven toilets? What do you mean the capital fund?
No, for the
We're
electrical.
thinking to plan for it, no, next year, the 23-24, the transfer to capital. We're going to come up with a timeline of all the different bathrooms at Miller Haven and when can we do them? So gradually instead of all at once.
Don't we have another year of the roof work that we need
Yes,
to, if we're going to increase the transfer to capital, or you're saying that this would be?
Part of
it would be part of it,
Part of
or it may have
Well,
to
we
be
have
increased.
allocated, if we keep going with the roof projects for another.
Well, I think
Yeah.
You're jumping.
I think the other part, I think the other part of it is, so before we go down, I mean, this is
Yeah.
part of this planning of the budget committee for this year, as we start to discuss this, it seems that we have some capital project planning to do, and whether increases to transfer to capital, whether establishing another fund, whatever the circumstances may be, that's part of those discussions, I guess, that we'll have to add as we're proposing agenda items, right, looking forward.
Yeah.
Is what I'm hearing, is that?
No, I just think
Yes.
we just need to understand, I think, early on, if in the budget process, if you're talking about increasing transfer to capital or changing what
What
the
it's
pre-existing
going
plan
for.
was, right? Because I think we have, what, 2 more years of roof work
Mhm.
that we're already
We
allocated.
have done more than
Yes.
just roof work in the transfer
Right.
to capital.
No, I understand, but we
No.
have a certain amount that we
Right.
keep our budget consistent.
Correct,
Since
but
we
we-
only have essentially the
But we've
past half.
done more than roof work in our transfer to
I
capital.
understand, but it's accounted for. The amount that we've always been using is basically accounted for with roof work.
Okay, the good news is, this is our first meeting of
Yeah.
September,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful that we've already got a great agenda item for moving forward and transfer to capital, and how we will be covering it will be one of our main priorities, it sounds like, from a budgetary standpoint.
Just want to be clear, just thinking potentially who's watching now or later, all the cafetoriums will have air conditioning. I don't want anybody leaving thinking they're not getting any air. Is that
Thank you.
correct? Yes.
Yes, that's what I heard, and that's, yes, what
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
If it has an auditorium, the auditorium
Auditorium
gets
gets
it.
the
If it's
cafeteria.
a combination, then it's a cafetorium.
One of the other reasons why we're suggesting this, Justin, do you want to talk about the 45-day piece and then what we are
Yes.
anticipating if we were to rebid?
Yes, so legally, the bids were open on August 11th. Contractors have 45 calendar days to hold their numbers, according to in touch with them, telling them what's going on. So if we don't make a decision, they can withdraw their bid, and there's been an increase based on market trends in the last 45 days, supply issues, things like that, which has been generally the impression I've been getting out in the field and in the industry right
In the
now.
industry, we're seeing it's trending up again, so we, especially again on the electrical pieces. So we feel if we were to rebid these, the numbers could potentially come back higher again.
So am I clear in understanding that your recommendation is for the interior Weber doors, the electrical upgrades, and even for the toilet renovations, that we would want to accept those bids right now as they stand? Does that also include the Guggenheim HVAC as well?
No, the Guggenheim HVAC is separate,
Okay.
just those 3 projects
Those
that
3
you
projects.
previously mentioned would then work towards the increase the budget for the Sousa now that Manhattan and Salem.
Okay.
We're accepting those bids,
Yeah.
Salem, Sousa, and Manor Haven. That's the bids we're accepting.
Right, but the 3 that Julie just
Weber.
mentioned, those we are not doing. We're going to
Absorb
absorb
them.
those
Right.
so that we can award these bids.
Right. I got that part. I understood. That's the recommendation, that we allow, okay. So I guess the question is, the
Well,
vote,
this would be
you
what
have
we
this
have
on
to
the
agree.
agenda for the 20th, right?
Yes, so
So we'll
we'll,
put these in the packet on Thursday.
But
They-
once the 45-day mark, you need approval.
September 25th.
Right.
So we're okay.
Yeah, even an emailed copy of the letter after the next day after the board is sufficient.
okay, wonderful. So Kathy, then you'll be putting the resolution into the agenda for the 20th. You've given us a heads up in the packet already, but we'll have that again so that the board will be well apprised on what that means moving forward. And we'll go forth from there. I mean, I guess I should take a consensus of the committee that this is the recommendation that we would like to go forth with. Emily, are you?
Yes, I'm agree.
And Rachel, you're in agreement? Wonderful, I'm also in agreement. We formalized that, so this, we agree with the recommendation. All right, wonderful, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank
day.
you,
everyone.
Brian, thank you,
Thank you.
really appreciate it.
I'm sorry, wait, I have one more question,
Yes.
since we both have you here. Sorry, do you think that there are any projects that we, in light of what's happening with all of the bids and going, do you think that there's anything we should be moving on, or, moving faster on timing wise? I know,
That was actually the rationale, in the discussions last year.
Right.
Before Salem and this project went out, we actually took the air conditioning from Salem and Manor-Haven and wrapped them into the Sousa project. Because normally, the planning would have been to include the air conditioning with the addition at Salem, but the way prices were escalating, we knew that that was one of the priorities, was the AC in the common spaces when the bond went out for the vote. So we pushed that up, those two schools, common space AC, in with the Sousa addition project.
okay, so you think, so we're thinking, okay, we have had a community member that has reached out, actually Alan Bear, who was on the board when the whole process started with the bond, who would like, and I think there's been other community members who've asked about where do we stand with the bond. So I would like for us to consider, and I'm kind of jumping into your next topic, but I would like, as part of our ongoing meetings, and I think it's best to probably do it at a general board meeting as well, to have a presentation on, kind of like what we started off saying, the bond what it was in 2015 and the bond where it is today and what we have outstanding. Just so that I think it's good for the community at large to get an understanding. The work
Including the
that
money
we've done.
and the status.
Yes,
Yes.
including the money and the
We should post
status,
like
so I'm
a-
just
like a
saying
clear
if
document on
you
the
guys.
website also.
Yeah, absolutely, that's
Yes,
something,
yes.
just let us know what next, the
Thank
meeting
you.
like that.
We'll let you
for,
know.
and we could work- we could have that ready for you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, so they're on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was one of my agenda topics, but.
You're
go ahead.
good, you moved on to the agenda topics already, so that's wonderful. So last year, we, as a committee, and I think it was very successful for us, we were able to go forth and kind of lay out the agenda topics in advance, and then we'll bring them to the board to make sure that the board is in approval of those agenda topics as a priority. One of the challenges of the budget committee is that usually our priorities financially will align with our district goals, and we have yet to decide our formalized district goals. But as we see here today, we already have some work set out for us, and so we can at least get a rough draft or a framework that we can present to the board of agenda topics moving forward. So with that, I think, is it easier for us as board members to present versus, did you prepare a draft calendar of?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so do you have
So
something to
this is
share?
for the actual budget process.
Right, that's for the
Okay.
budget process, so then that's fine, and so that's not gonna affect anything that we're gonna do for agenda topics. Okay, perfect, so then I'm gonna turn to board members on the committee. We asked if you guys had any ideas for agenda topics moving forward for meeting these. Rachel, I'll start with you, if you have anything you'd like to propose.
I think that my most important comment is less like a specific topic that I want in a meeting and an overall thing. I think we've been making a lot of adjustments over the last couple of years, in a good way, to our programs, to our curriculum. It means there's a lot of moving parts financially, and I think it would be helpful for the board to have a handle on the big picture implications of decisions we're making as we're making them, to whatever extent is possible.
Can you give me
I
an
know
example,
that's
like what
not
you're?
hard.
Yeah.
Well, like often we're presented with a change that is gonna that has a price tag attached to it, right? It would be good when we're making decisions about whether or not something is something that we should do, if we understood it in the context of the overall budget. And the reason I think that is because I think like any board member who cares about the schools, right? Anything that's presented that sounds great, that is an improvement, we want to fund. But I'm very conscious that, the pie is the size of the pie, even though occasionally we get like a little whipped cream on top in the state that we weren't expecting. And I would like, as a budget committee member, to just have a better handle on what the big picture looks like and what the give and take is. I do want to say, as I'm saying that I'm very clear that you're totally on top of this, Kathy, right? Obviously, like, we're having a balanced budget every year, and you're looking at this big picture. But I think maybe we can discuss figuring out a way for the committee to be able to see like where things are moving in order to be able to fund what needs to be funded.
So what is
I
the
think
topic
we'll
that we're
decide.
discussing?
So
I'm confused. How
I'm
would
not saying it's a topic,
Just the budget.
right? It's
The
not a
budget,
topic,
we're
it's
just
just
talking in
overall as
general
we're going
questions.
through
So-
the process.
So what I could be misinterpreting what you're saying, but maybe one of the things that would help, right, is at the beginning of every school year, we approve a budget, right? And it's a number, and that's really what we're approving. And things
Yeah.
get moved around and changed, and we never know which bucket is fuller than the other bucket, right? Really, other than staffing. And we need an idea of what's going on. So in addition to that, we ask those questions long-term, what can we do? A fiscal forecast moving forward. So I think, if I'm hearing you correctly, what might be helpful is, as a committee, if we were presented with just a general picture, a snapshot of where we stand today in our financials, and maybe a forecasting future of a 3 to 5 years moving forward, would maybe be able to give us some sense of if we were to stay exactly the same, if our state aid didn't change, if our grants didn't change, if nothing else changed, if we were to operate as we are today, right? Looking forward, how are we fiscally comfortable and
I mean,
forward
it
forecasting?
certainly gets to the root of my question, which is, if there's something that we feel like we wanna do, can we afford it, right? We
Right.
wanna be able to see that we really can afford it in an ongoing way. And I know it's your problem to deal with it on the back end and make sure we are affording it, but we wanna make sure that we're making decisions that are sustainable, right? For the taxpayer, for the district, while providing the best programs, it's a juggle every single year.
So if I'm understanding correctly too, any decision that comes up, whether it's at budget time or during the year, if something comes up that needs to be addressed, we first want to look at, is it consistent with our mission and our vision? And then after we see that, what are the cost implications and where am I going to find the money? Like, how can we
Right, I just
reallocate
Forecast it, not just for this year,
It's
forecast.
forecasting,
for the budget?
because you
Yes.
give us that when that
Yes.
happens.
Right.
As we get these suggestions for spending money or at requests,
Right.
you give us all of that, how it fits in. I think the question here is the forecasting of, before we get the
Maybe.
ask, how are we going to know? Where is it, bigger picture?
I mean, look, it makes budgeting more complicated when the district is not static, right? But I think that we're all glad that we're not just like resting on status quo, we're happy to have all these recommendations and the changes that we're making. It just, from like a budgetary oversight angle, it creates a more difficult piece for us as board members, because if you're presented with something that sounds wonderful, that's great, but we wanna make sure we're making a good fiscal decision as well as a good curricular decision.
So you're saying, I'm sorry, because I wasn't getting forecasting from what you were saying.
I didn't
I could have been wrong,
say-
that was, that's why.
But
I
you're
didn't
talking
actually say
long-term, like
forecasting.
how much does it affect us into the future?
I mean, I think
Type of
that,
question.
I actually would defer to you on, what form that takes, but what I'm saying is like, in the past, I have felt that the financial recommendation feels a little bit isolated from everything else. And even though I'm enthusiastic about the program itself, I'm worried about, can we afford it next year? Can we afford it the year after? And I think Julie's suggestion of making that a forecasting element is a good one, because that really is the crux of the matter, right? Because I'm assuming by the time we get a recommendation from the rest of the administration, Dr. Hines has spoken to you and said, so how can you figure out how to make this work? And you have said, I can make it work.
Sometimes.
Which is, yeah, I think
Yes,
forecasting is not a bad
agreed.
idea. I don't think it has to be 5 years. I don't think it has to be that much necessarily every time, but just, we do have a plan for the future and this will be fine. And here's what we have to lose for this. Because I don't think the budgeting process has to always be adding things. And I think you're doing this too, but if we have inefficiencies,
Totally.
if we have places that we're wasting money, that we can cut money, I think we're also always happy to hear those moments. And
100%.
like, wherever we're not serving students with something, I think that.
Yeah, it's a great segue, because it's not always adding money, right? So I'll just give an example. Let's just say we're looking at Program X, and let's say Program X requires 3 staff members. And let's say Program X with 3 staff members roughly is about something thousand with benefits and everything else, right?
300.
I was just
Yeah,
gonna say
300.
300.
I wish it was 100, but.
It was
Oh, I thought I said 300.
You did say
Oh, I
three
said
hundred, yeah,
100.
no, he said
No, I said
300,000.
Thank you, I know it's Monday.
Oh, we heard 100.
No, that's all right, thanks, Julie. Let's say 300.
There's two.
So 300,000. So the question to Rachel's point is, all right, yes, we're gonna budget for next year. But what does it look like 3, 5, 7 years down the road? And at some point, let's say we take an average of whatever we're forecasting, state aid to date, on or about whatever we've been receiving on average for the past 5, 7 years. But the question that comes, and I think Rachel is on point here, is we have to look at what is not working. And look at things that, even though they've been here with potentially 10, 15, 20, 75 years, it doesn't mean it's what's best for kids. And what's the price point for that? And I'm not saying to totally remove something just because it's been there, but maybe to downsize it in some way.
So wouldn't that be a topic for the curriculum committee?
Well,
And
I
then,
think it depends
because it
on-
has
It depends on the item.
Yeah, because it could be curricular in nature, and as far as that reduction, it could be something that's operational, but that's in nature too. I think it really depends on where that lives, and that's why, if it's curricular, Sean clearly would have that conversation with the curriculum committee.
But if it's like Dave Perkins' pet, the printing,
Correct.
the printing office.
Well, we've done that.
Right,
would
right,
really
right.
care.
All right, so do you have any other agenda topics then for, okay,
I'm assuming this is on our list already, but at
our
some,
list is being made right now.
well, our mental list,
Yeah.
right? We talked about playgrounds a lot last year. I know we're forming a committee. Is there a plan to have a report to this committee from that committee at some point? Or does that committee take it from here? Does it need to come back?
Is it district?
I think it's a district
district
committee,
committee?
so I think it's gonna come back to the board, I think.
So do we
That's what I was
want to
thinking, yeah.
anticipate when that would be, if it's gonna come back to
Well, if
the
it goes to
board?
the board, I think that's up to Adam.
Right,
Oh,
it would reach.
But you haven't even finished establishing the committee yet, so it's
No,
probably
so,
gonna be most of the school year.
Denise is reaching out
Yeah.
to potential committee members by the end of this week.
So, I guess then maybe it's a question for Adam. Do you think that that's something that should come back to this committee towards the end of the year, or is that something that should come to the general board?
I think the board, because if there's a recommendation, the board has to
Right,
decide
just
on
do it
in
from there.
entirety anyway,
Yeah,
so,
okay.
and that's probably more towards the end of the school year, if I'm correct.
Right.
Yeah.
I have some work to do.
I think, synergistic and energy kind of stuff needs to be on our agenda, right? I know we talked about solar panels and things like that a few years ago, but it may be that that's something that we want to talk about again, along with all of this.
Green initiative.
Green initiatives, yes. It may be, I mean, that's the hugest budgetary item, but I don't know if there are other green initiatives that could potentially also have budgetary implications, that we want to talk about. And then the other thing on my list, is actually quite small. But with back to school, I've been wondering about school supplies. And the reason that I'm wondering that is because we do this really inefficient thing every year where every single parent buys a box of crayons, or 2 boxes of crayons, or 3 boxes of crayons. And the HSAs and various organizations pick up the slack and buy them for families that cannot afford to buy them, which would have been my big concern, so I know that's taken care of. But the school district, with the district's buying power, could buy a pallet of crayons, and I'm guessing that would be a lot less expensive than the individual boxes. I know, I'm very aware that if we roll this into the budget, even though it might not be a big amount, it has an impact on the taxpayer, and maybe this is something that we want.
This is what our council was asking for last year, right? Was this Jessica Maloney, this is the adding school supplies into the budget?
So I'm not actually saying that, I'm saying, can we discuss it and find out like what the cost would be, even if we did it as a pass-through to parents, right?
Bulk buying.
Okay,
The
bulk buying,
bulk
right.
buying, right, like,
Okay.
what's
Would it
the
be cheaper?
cost? Even if we did, even if we couldn't roll it into the budget or felt it was wrong to roll it into the budget to pass it on to the taxpayer, can the district use its bulk buying power to make it all less
Right,
expensive. Because again, the pie is the size of the pie, it has an impact on every family. And for the HSAs that are buying for the families that can't, that money could then be spent on something else.
So
Mike?
wasn't
Wait.
there,
Oh, I called on Mike though.
That's-
He had his hand
Well,
raised,
I think
and then I'll go
we're
right
gonna
to
say
you.
something.
Okay.
We're gonna say
So-
something.
so you go.
We'll probably
Yeah.
say more.
No.
So we met with administrators, district office met with administrators over the summer, and we discussed some of the items, such as paper towels, such as wipes, such as like all the perishable items. That the district, we feel tissues, all those different things. We should be paying for those things. So we had a conversation with the principals, and we're looking, certainly Kathy was there as well, and we're looking to make recommendations to include that into the budget for next year. Because those items, I mean, to think that we're asking parents to bring 5 rolls of paper towels, 10 rolls of toilet paper, it's just, it seems like it's silly. Something that we should be paying for. So that's, I think, the good first step for us to talk about these conversations. The second one is, what's happened with all the scissors for the past 15 years that we're asking
That
parents, to bring every single year. So we had these ongoing conversations right now. I think we're in a better place than we were this year. And I guess we can continue.
Is that what you're gonna say?
Hold on, wait,
Yes,
no.
it's what I was gonna
How
say.
did you know that?
What I was
Stop.
going to say is that the board knows there was an agenda update, and there was also an update from our meeting with Jessica Milani that this is something the Parents Council has been speaking to the administration about, and it's something that they brought up to us. If you, I think it was when you were in Greece and we sent out an email about.
It was it talked
Yeah,
about school supplies,
absolutely.
non-perishables
Correct.
such as
So,
toilet
yeah,
paper and stuff.
so that's all I was gonna say, is that
Anyway.
it's something that we've been talking about, with Rachel, it's something that we've been talking about, and it's actually something that Dr. Hines had mentioned to us in the agenda, that we would be giving an update to the board once there was something out of the administration that they were ready to share. So I think, not to put a wet towel on what you're saying, Rachel, but I think that it's already, yeah.
I think whatever piece
Yeah.
isn't dealt with that way though, and just to clarify, I don't think we ever made anybody bring toilet paper.
No,
But-
I was
No. So you bring wipes and
But-
county.
but we do.
Yeah.
Even though the paper towels feel like sand.
Right, so I am,
Paper towels, right?
I think, I'm not to cut you off, and I'm so sorry, I just wanna give everyone an opportunity, I know we're tight on time, but unless consent for school
We don't,
supplies.
we don't
Okay.
have to send
We don't-
the
we're
whole
just-
issue today.
Right, we're just trying to make
the.
the list, right, exactly, all right, Ms. Bates.
So, yes, I thank you. I think I mentioned at the board meeting, the first board meeting, I do want to add possibility of having a demographer come and do a study of our, the facilities and what we have in the demography of our town. So we did that years ago, and I think it's important that we do that again, just to see, as we've been discussing, some classrooms and some grades are getting crowded, and so I think it's time we look at that. I do think that if in fact, we also have the property, the Guggenheim property, that I know we had gotten some discussion started last year about the sale of that property, and there was some interest. So, the Sandstorm property, right?
Yes.
So I'd like to get an update as a topic of that, where we stand with that property. I think it also kind of ties in with, are we selling that property for sure? If we get a demography report that says we're gonna need, more buildings, I don't know, I'm just saying, let's keep that in mind. The other thing that I would like for us to start talking about is the grants that we receive as a school district. And so I think it'd be important for us to all get a big picture of the amount of money that we receive in grants, what type of grants we're receiving. And more importantly, I would like to be able to see, we talked about this years ago, having somebody come on that would be a grant writer, because I know that there are some people, we do have some help with grants, but there are grants out there that I am pretty sure we kind of leave on the table because we don't have the manpower or to be able to be going out for these grants. So we had talked, if you remember, Rachel, this was back in the Dave Kirkman days, we had talked about having somebody come, they're more like consultants that get paid based on a percentage of the grant that they get. So I think it would be worthwhile for us to try to look for something like that, and if there's money that we can get, why not? And The other thing I have an idea of is we do our facilities tours of our buildings every year and that is what we've been required to do. But we also, I learned last year when I did tour the Sands Point property and the Guggenheim Preserve, that's property that is owned by the community, through the school district, that it would be helpful maybe to set a tour of the, out of the way type properties. Like for instance, we've never toured Central Admin, as a community. And I think that if anybody toured Central Admin, they learn.
You only fit 4 people.
Right.
We don't tour Daily Annex,
We
we don't,
work by peering in the windows.
Right. So I think it would be helpful to tour some of the field, like I think it'd be helpful for the community to see the Sands Point property and the Guggenheim property and Preserve property. So I think if we could just add that as a topic, okay, those are all my things.
Great. So I attacked it a little bit differently because I'm a nerd. And so I just wrote all mine down and I outlined it by month because I feel that with budget planning and processes, that you really need to be thoughtful in your planning for timing, right? So if we call a demographer in and the budget's already passed, it's not necessarily helping us forecast enrollment for the upcoming year. Ms. Bays had mentioned the demographer, so that's probably why you see it on here for December. Oh yeah, those are next. I'm sorry,
Right?
no, it's fine. Sorry, I just made a few copies. So again, I laid it out just by month to help us look at a snapshot. And I think actually what works out really nicely is the items that both Emily and Rachel have brought forth for us can be covered in some of these big topics. So instead of just saying school supplies alone, right? We could be looking at it as an expense or a revenue resource, or how are we doing our collective or cooperative bargaining or bulk purchasing better, things of that nature. So if just to quickly go through it so everyone sees, I recommend that in October we really spend a lot of time because the latter half of the meetings are all budget focused, right? By fiscally budget focused, and we are also a facilities committee. That we really spend time in October talking about recapping those facility tours, what came out of those facility tours, what priority punch list came out of that facility tour, where we are on our 5-year plan now in adjusting it if we need to adjust it. Did anything change? And this will also help us to better forecast when we see like what roofs have been completed, what roofs aren't as emergent or are emergent, or as we're making those adjustments to our transfer to capital. So again, just having it all at one point time period. I included also Sands Point Preserve and the Guggenheim Preserve Meadow there to incorporate those daily annex. I did not include, because I just think of that as our physical properties, but it's a very good point as far as our community tours are concerned. In also looking at that for facilities, we've talked a lot about, as Rachel mentioned, synergistic, or we have energy performance contracts. We haven't discussed those in a long time, and those are a revenue resource for us, or can be a potential revenue resource for us. So maybe incorporating that into that big facilities contract, a big facilities discussion of here are where all of our big expenses are, but let's see where we can be more thoughtful in our revenue side of it all, and really be forward looking for revenues or find other areas. Are there facility grants out there? You're mentioning security grants to help us offset some of our expenses. Putting that all into that framework and presenting it as that kind of neat package gives us that overall look of what we're trying to do. And then again, we have some increased utility costs. We're going to have increased expenses that we have moving forward because of supply chain and the pandemic, really kind of also encapsulating that. Moving into November, maybe that overall financial forecast and also I really think that even though this isn't the policy committee, as a Board of Education, our job is the budget. And our policies regarding the budget in the 6,000 series have not really been touched since 1991. And that's where our community goes. That's where we as board members go to understand the process. I really think it would be worthwhile if the budget committee said, are our policies in line with what we do? Do they provide all of the information? Do they talk about a contingency budget? Do they not? Because that's where that information will be. and that whole process and regulation. So maybe potentially take it slow, we can cover that time period and then bring it to the policy committee.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
Date.
Well, that's okay. Oh, I don't care. We can change the date. I'm just giving you general.
Okay.
I was just general. I'm just big picture here. This is all big picture on a monthly basis. December, demographer and enrollment, because prior to January, we're gonna start talking, so maybe we would look if the board accepts the idea of that, look to hire a demographer, have that process started and have those conversations starting in December. So we have that data for us moving forward as we begin our budget planning process in the January and forward moving months. And then January, our revenue shortfalls, our budget priorities and decisions for January, February, and March, when we know what our district priorities are. And then May, a budget hearing, which we don't have on the calendar, so we need to add a date for that. And June, our overall review of how this all went. Again, that worked really well for us last year. It was our first time having you present, Kathy, and talking, in a different way. Let's reevaluate ourselves and go through this and really see what's working and what's not working, and really have concrete data. I think, so that's how I approached this, and I think all of the topics that both Ms. Bays and Ms. Gilliard brought in can easily kind of be brought in under these headings. I don't know if you see that or not, but, or if you think that the timeline lays out, or if everyone's like, wait a minute, we weren't expecting this, you can take a moment. I'm a lot sometimes, so.
No, I think this is great, Julie. I think this is perfect, and you're right, these topics are already incorporated, based on what Rachel and I said, so, and this is really, and I do think, Rachel and I did not discuss the financial policies, but I think you make a very valid point. Those policies really should be looked at. In the past, we've done combined budget, and when a policy, and I believe the policy committee is looking at one of the 6,000, right, the purchasing, which has to happen every year. So sometimes we've done combined meetings, but I do think they are really budget-focused policies, so we as a committee can take that on and make the proposed changes. I don't know that it could go.
I don't know that conversation would happen here. I think it would happen.
We can look at the policies here and say this needs to be done. We don't have to do joint. In other words, we could do work without
I
actually.
know, I'm
doing
saying,
joint.
I think the policy committee could look at it too, but we should take a look and see what we're talking about.
Right,
I mean, Deborah was a very efficient policy chair. so
100%, no,
My guess is that some of the stuff,
But we haven't gotten through those.
well, some of them have to be looked at every year and decided that it's fine by law.
Right.
And then some of them, my guess is there's nothing substantial, but we should certainly look. I think that over the last 2 years, we've been making our way through all the policies to see what can be updated or needs to be updated. So,
Okay.
So
absolutely.
again, so, and I guess I have to now,
That's a budget topic.
right, so again, so that kind of playing out, I want to just turn for just a second, Mr. Smith, do you have anything that you'd like to add to some of this agenda topic, situation, or outlay of information?
After you,
Did I leave anything
you
out?
covered a lot. The only thing that I wanna just add in is, and this is actually kind of already covered under the financial forecast. Happy, I vaguely remember last year there was a conversation about software,
Yes,
and maybe, did that go anywhere?
about forecast 5, yes.
Yeah.
Jessica has been working with our treasurer to get her on board with how to use forecast 5. So
So,
we have started laying the groundwork for it.
and is that something that could be, do you think by November,
Oh, yes.
covering in this stuff, so we might actually have a real forecast?
Forecast.
Yeah, and then in terms of that software, I assume it's like, you have to kind of make assumptions,
Yes.
and is that like something that you like bring to this committee and say, how do you want us to model it, or would you bring
I
it already
would-
modeled?
I would actually bring it with the assumptions that I've gotten from colleagues. And
Got it.
also the company forecast 5, they help you with the projections of what they're seeing the trends are in the economy and things.
Got it.
So I would bring that to you. And then if you thought we should have different assumptions, you can easily change it because once it's all set up,
Got it.
it's very.
So you could kind of bring like with the projection, kind of a list of this is kind of the big
Sure.
things that we
yeah.
guessed.
Yes, like I would tell you, for salaries, for health insurance costs, for contractual utilities, things like that.
Got
And also for revenue side, the state aid, what our reserves would look like, also what the tax levy would look like.
Perfect. And then, the only other two things that I think may, Julie, again, fall under your buckets is, looking closely at transportation, specifically kind of what the big increase that happened, I guess, after the budget closed last year.
Right.
What does that do to the budget this year, and assuming that carries forward into the future? And,
That could go into financial forecast, right?
yeah, I think everything fits.
Right?
And then, yeah, I'm just gonna
She's
give that
forgetting
to the
which
list. And then the other big topic was, whatever items are, burning off of that ARP grant, how we're,
Right, grants. Right.
how and if we're paying for those.
Okay. Okay. All right, so from that standpoint then, now I turn to the administration and Kathy specifically here, because this will really fall a lot in your bucket. Does this seem in line with, or a reasonable ask that we can help us as we're forecasting moving forward? I mean, all of this is really supposed to help and aid in the budget process. And also get some of the work done in advance, so, right, to some degree?
Yes.
Does this fall in line with what you would like to?
Yes, I think this looks terrific. The demographer, I'm not familiar with hiring demographers or how fast that process takes, but I would look into it.
I think BOCES, we can go through BOCES, which maybe take longer. I do not remember, we did do a demographer.
The town might have something, right, or no, town?
Yeah, it wasn't that, I don't remember, I could look into it as well, but I don't remember seeing it as raising our hand, but I don't know if it's.
So I just, as long as you're on that topic, as a board member, I've never seen that demographer's report that we finished with last time before the bond. So I think
haven't seen it as a board member either.
so I think if we're reintroducing this idea, I think we should know what we're coming from. And
I don't know that it exists anywhere on the internet. I know what you're saying, but I don't know that anybody has a copy of it anywhere. If this was,
Well, a true demographer will actually go back
They did it at a
historically and
board
then
meeting.
project forward
that's
too.
my
So-
point. So I am ignorant of all of this. My question is, when that demographer's report was prepared, how many years forward were they taking us? Are we too early to a new demographer is my question. So that's number one, I don't wanna hire a demographer if the demographer made projections through 2025.
Right.
So, and I really like as a board member, I can't imagine that this report is not available, so I would like to see it at some point, so that I have.
Okay, so we can try and locate the demographer report.
You ever
It's my-
seen it?
It's,
Administrators?
I mean,
Well,
Chris was probably, but
That would be funny.
At the very least, we should be
Yeah,
able,
we'll see if we can find it.
at the very least, we should be able to identify who the demographer was.
I would think it would be in the
Go back to
board
that.
document,
It'll be
bond
in the
document,
board
it would be the
minutes.
board and bond
It's gotta be
document.
part of the bond.
Yeah.
It's definitely part of the bond.
Right.
Isn't there like a?
Oh, they have historical stuff though, so it'll be okay. Well, we can, that's something else we can look into. I will tell you, I know very little about a demographer, but as you know, in my spare time, I do enjoy watching board meetings over the course of many years, and it appears to me, and then researching their style and prayer, that people seem to do it every 5 to 7 years. So we would be right in line, even if at the 2015 bond period, I believe. But we could also ask that as a question of a demographer, as well to say, if we had one done in 2015-ish period, are we too early in
It was
this
done
regard?
before 2015.
Right, so again, but I think that that's a question, if we're in agreement that this is something we want to do, then if we could look into it and try and locate the report, that would also be wonderful. Mike, do you have any comments in
No.
regards to this?
No, this is really comprehensive, so thank you. No, I just want to underscore or actually agree with Rachel, synergistic. So are we looking at then the potential for them to come to the October meeting? Is that what we're
Well-
potentially saying?
We could include them in the October meeting under the conversation of energy performance contracts. I don't know, first of all, the board has to approve, right, that these agenda items are the ones that the board wants to do at our September 20th meeting. We would approve this outline. And if we wanted to invite Synergistic, it might be best to invite them and have a separate budget meeting in addition, and maybe just our October meeting be scheduled to cover these items and just bring them in separately to
Okay.
talk about their wares. It could be that we just schedule a second October meeting or whatnot, if that works out, but maybe we first do the initial meeting and get the big picture, and then.
Right, because I
go
think
down.
the first thing that we have to understand is, as a committee, for sure, is what are energy contracts, right? Who do we have energy
Right,
contracts
right.
with? When are they expiring?
Right.
And then I think I would see them as a potential vendor,
Right,
right?
bring them
And
in.
so maybe we wanna talk to more than one vendor.
Sure.
Maybe that's something we discuss and say, you know, we should talk to more, okay.
And speaking of vendors, just really quickly, sorry, Julie, as it relates to just so I'm thinking that you're gonna bring this to the board on Tuesday, as it relates to the December demographer topic,
Yes.
what is that topic? Like, is it in December that you're gonna talk about it and get pricing and?
No, I would hope that right now,
Yeah.
if the board approves this idea, then I would think that the idea would be that Kathy could begin researching a demographer and the pricing, and it would be presented for approval by the board in October,
Okay.
so that we could have the discussion in December. I guess I should have put demographer results.
Okay.
Is
So-
really what I should have said I was
So what the
aiming
board is
for.
gonna approve is we're gonna approve basically Kathy to go and get quotes for demographers, and then
It
they
would
will be
come in
brought back to
October.
us, then the whole year we will decide if it's an investment they wanna make at
Right,
that time,
right,
and hopefully have the report done in time for December meeting.
in time for December, but
If
if it's
ambitious.
if it's
If
possible.
If it's not, right, again, that's the part I
Yeah.
don't, but again, we'd like to at least start the ball rolling on researching how long it would
Right.
take or whatever, but. Okay,
For October, under facilities,
Yes.
I know somebody mentioned the bond update, that
Yes.
would be included with the facilities.
yes,
for October. And then also potentially, under facilities, A, B, and C, talking about our BCS. That's a process will be starting in January.
BCS.
A building condition survey.
Oh, great, wonderful,
So that's typically done every 5
5
years,
years,
but
right.
the state amended the law to put it on a cyclical basis, so we haven't gone 9 years, the last one was 2015. We'll be starting that in January of 2023, but that would be a big contributing factor to a lot of those other points.
yes, perfect, yeah, I called it a 5-year plan, sorry, but thank you, yes, wonderful, thank you so much, That's a wonderful point.
Well, they're two separate
Separate
things.
plans,
The
okay.
BCS will contribute to your 5-year plan.
Okay,
How is
okay.
that different than what you saw last year from the architect?
That's very similar to it.
Okay.
A lot of those things are gonna be part of the 5-year plan, because he was getting ready to do the BCS.
BCS is
Right.
an
Same
SCD.
content.
It's SCD
It's an
requirement.
SCD requirement,
Right.
so we're just
There might
following
be
that
overlap,
information
right.
into that. But we'll be doing that starting in January, and then that will, be your guiding light towards your 5-year plan and other capital plans,
Okay.
and an EPC.
Great. So from a budget committee standpoint, because I'm mindful of the time again, I'd like to give the community opportunity.
I don't think we got Kathy's budget.
We're gonna get her budget thing. It's really just the budget calendar, correct, right, Kathy? But before we get to the budget calendar, just a second.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure, if I present this to the board, this document here laying out dates, and I know Kathy, you said you may have a conflict with November, so we can and you may have a conflict, so we, November. Yes, so we can change the date, we can change the dates if we need to. But if we're at least in a draft to present to the board, or is this committee, I can add some of the more specific things that were brought up by both you and by Ms. Giller, by Ms. Bays, and run it by you as long as you're okay. We would present this at the board meeting on the 20th. And again, just for the board to approve that this is the right direction that this committee is moving forward in, and it still can all change. I mean, we can be flexible if we need to.
I'm completely okay with this big picture.
Okay.
Overview of what the year looks like, it's helpful, I think.
Okay,
If I can add one little detail, I think would be on our October meeting.
yeah,
Pre-COVID, we actually had like a spin-off, I think it was formed as an ad hoc committee to look at the Sands Point property specifically and discuss and brainstorm, maybe it would be actually a community committee. Anyway, I don't know how we would do it.
well, we
but-
have a realtor right now, the property is up, right, so, right, oh,
I know we have a realtor, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, I think we should discuss whether or not we want to form a small committee to look at,
Okay.
again, ideas for this property as a
If
way
we
of
don't
further
sell it.
analyzing
Yes.
whether or not we actually should sell.
got it.
There's two questions.
Right.
What about, are you talking about the committee for the one that's on the sale or for the
the sale.
No, the sale one.
This was,
The
so,
sale
okay,
one.
so wait,
Can I ask a question?
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
No, wait, I have a question though, because Rachel just brings something up and I don't know the answer to this. Can we do that?
Yes.
So,
But you had voters vote on it.
right.
We've been
right,
together a
no,
long
no,
time,
no,
Rachel.
no,
We
no,
have
no,
to-
we have-
I don't know that we can, if
Yeah.
we have a, we have to look this up legally, I don't know the
No, I
answer
know
to
the
this.
answer, because we already talked about it when we talked about it a couple years ago. We can double check.
I think we should, because if there's an actual offer, we've never had an offer. If there is an offer on the table, can we as a board of 7 decide not to sell it when in fact the community voted for us to sell it?
So I asked this question pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Of our previous business manager, and I think we checked it and we asked.
We should check it again, we really
I
should.
I never have any objection to double checking.
Yeah, I don't know the
My
answer.
understanding is the voters approved giving us permission to sell it. The voters voting on it is not a mandate that we must sell it. It is permission to sell it, which legally a district needs to be able to dispose of real property.
Yes.
And the board and the administration can decide, circumstances have changed, this is not something we should sell, or this is not the right price, or it's not enough money, or all those things, and are not bound to sell the property. I have no objection to checking it out, but that's my understanding, is that
We
we
should
are
definitely
not
get-
obligated.
So we'll check it out, but here's the deal, again, we're getting in the weeds here, we're big picture today, and of October, if after hearing about this, and we'll make sure that that information is at the October meeting about whether or not we can go forward, we as a committee can say, we'd like to form an ad hoc committee, right, as our recommendation at the end of this meeting, to form an ad hoc committee to look into utilizing the property in this manner. And I think that's a great way to go forward, so that would be, that's what we could talk about in
That sounds
October.
great, and I actually think it ties in nicely to the demographer idea, that
Right.
ends up
Which is
being
what I said
something that
originally,
we need to do.
Right.
But it's really the demographer, it's the facilities overview, I see you over there, you're like, oh my God, I'm ambitious and they always put more on the plate anyway. I think it ties into the real close look that we're taking at this district right now. 3 years ago, we didn't have as much information to be thinking about how this property could be used. Those discussions were interesting,
Right,
but they were like very pie in the sky, what do we want?
right.
And I think we could potentially this year have a lot more information about what we actually need to.
Right.
Great.
And I know that committee then was worried about trying to make it like a revenue stream as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
Ideally.
Perfect. So okay, great. So we are all in agreement. We'll add all this and we'll have that as another discussion in October. This is what we'll be presenting to the board as the recommendation. We also have the resolution that was presented. Kathy has her proposed draft plan for our budget process this year, which will have our budget work session dates in it, I'm assuming, correct?
I know, yes, it does. I've
Okay.
actually added January 31st because I think there's a January 24th.
Yes,
there is. But I was looking into the January 31st, because the 24th, I think will be too soon.
So these meetings are actually evenings for the future.
The work
Except for
sessions,
the first
except for
one.
the 31st is not.
31st.
So we would have to ask for the
We want
board,
to add the board, this would have to be
Your
a full
resolution.
board meeting, all right? Right? It's not gonna
I'm not
be,
sure if it has to be a full, could it just be a work session?
could it be a budget?
budget committee meeting,
Or,
we don't have to make any decisions, right?
right,
It's just presentation.
Right.
We can incorporate it as a budget committee meeting, and if work needs to come out of it where the board needs to vote on it, you know.
It wouldn't go to, well, it would go to the February 14th.
Yeah, we go to the February 14th meeting, and it could be piggybacked on that. Are you envisioning that you're doing an overview at this January 31st as an initial starting point?
it's going to be a little bit of that, but then we are gonna have presentations.
I think it should be a board meeting.
Well, last year-
So, yeah,
Last year, we did all of these as board meetings.
Right.
I'm not sure that was entirely necessary or efficient, I think it's something we could talk about.
What Kathy's saying now is to add
So-
a meeting.
so this is the question, so we'll ask the whole board. We will ask the whole board at the September 20th meeting, and we'll see what we think. we'll get an idea, because if we do wanna do that, we have to do a resolution to change the calendar, right, to add the meeting. So we'll get that as our recommendation.
But last year there were two, it was like February 1st and
Right.
February 11th.
I remember that.
But we have a board meeting scheduled on January 24th.
24th.
So maybe the suggestion is to actually change our January 24th meeting to January 31st.
But that would be for the board, so again, this is a discussion.
We can have that
for the board.
discussion on
Correct.
Tuesday.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Because you don't have to necessarily add a meeting, you're saying it might be too early for you to discuss it on the
Right.
24th.
Right.
But if it's a week later, I will tell you right now, Adam Block is gonna vote for changing the meeting date as opposed to voting.
To another meeting,
No,
right,
I
exactly.
don't think, I don't think Adam Block just wants fewer of these.
Right, so
Right,
you
right, right,
add a
right,
meeting.
right.
So,
You
yeah,
don't wanna add a meeting.
So again, we will present this at September 20th to the board, and again, if the discussion wants to be had, whether or not these should be full board meetings, that conversation can be had at the meeting publicly with the entire board present and have their input as
And
well.
also, this is draft, because
Right.
Ruth has been trying to get
The
the
dates.
information, but nobody has set them yet. So-
Yeah. That's fine. I also do note, so you have public hearing, you wanna do on May 2nd. We don't have a meeting scheduled right now for May 2nd,
Board meeting.
a board meeting. We have a board meeting only on May 16th, according to the calendar. So that's great that you have May 2nd here on as your board budget hearing.
well, no, but this is the public hearing, so
Yeah.
don't we do, that's like a standalone, it's not like a board meeting, right?
It is a
No, it
board
is.
meeting.
But don't we notice it as the budget?
We say it's a budget hearing, but we also incorporate it in as a board
It's a
meeting.
board meeting.
Yes, we do, yeah.
But we don't have to, right?
Have to.
We have to have a public hearing.
Yeah, but it can be a standalone.
I have it on my calendar.
But it has to be
You
on
do?
the-
Yeah, yeah,
It's
no,
not
it's
on
our
the
district
calendar.
It's not on the district calendar, no.
It's not on a district calendar, so we just need to check to make sure, and that's fine if we have it as yes.
Okay.
Either way, it's a public hearing, the Board
Right.
of Education has to be present, and we have to have a
Totally,
public hearing.
well,
Yeah.
No, I
the
think
Board
the
of Ed
board
doesn't
has
have
to
to
have a
necessarily.
public hearing.
Right, but if I remember from last year,
No, it
it
does.
does.
We do.
From the Board of Ed.
Yes,
Yes.
for the budget,
Our
our most
budget.
important,
No, I understand,
It's our budget.
you're talking about a different public hearing, I understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
yes, this is a
I'm
different
not
hearing.
sure. but-
Well, either way,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's apparently, we're gonna double check, it's not on the district calendar right now, but maybe it is on our schedule to have a May 2nd public hearing.
It's not in the district.
But either way, we need to have
We need to
some
have it
sort of
every-
public hearing, it's
Right.
a requirement, it's, yes.
We got
Right, it has to be done before the vote.
Yes. Okay, so we're seeing that May 2nd is our date.
I think what we've heard is that we have
Literally
some
just have
conflicts
Kathy
with some
O'Hara
of the
there
meeting
to go
We
through
do have
it.
some conflicts with the meeting dates, is what we do here.
Wait, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
I'm totally looking at it, I agree with you.
It's right here, oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's not.
Alright, so we're gonna
So-
find out May 2nd, right?
May
We
2nd,
have
we're
to
going
add
to
it
look
to the
into it,
calendar.
and but we're
It's
going,
posted.
and we have to find out if we really need to have this public hearing.
No, we have to have the
We
public
have to
hearing.
have
But
it.
what
About
I'm
whether
saying-
the
but my
quorum of the
understanding is-
board.
I'm not saying we need to do it this way, but my understanding is it could be Kathy by herself allowing the public to come and ask her questions.
Right.
It could be, that's what I thought. how it was
You're
gonna be.
asking if the quorum of the board has to be there, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we can
You'd
look
be the
into
only
that.
districts that I've ever heard of.
We can, I'm just saying, as a calendaring issue, we could just, for now, say May 2nd is the public hearing, we can decide later if we also need a full board meeting with a full agenda.
Right, right.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay, perfect. All right, so, and then Kathy, you have a conflict with the November date, and so does Emily.
And I have a conflict with the January too.
Am I having, am I hearing that we have a conflict in that, for you, Kathy, in November, the month of November,
Just the 14th, I won't be here.
the 14th, so then do you wanna,
The 12th.
so do you wanna suggest some other dates to us, and then your conflict is in January
As well.
as well, you have a date conflict, so can we go back and look at the calendar, I don't think we need to do this in the whole meeting, we can do this via email and work with our very effective and efficient Ruth to help us work through all those, okay. Are you okay if we do that via email and not in the committee meeting?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
No, but Emily asked if I had any.
Oh, yeah, no, I heard that, part, yeah, that's great, okay, excellent. All right, that being said, I'm gonna quickly go to the community, I'm sorry, we'll go very quickly to see if we have any community comments today. Mrs. Melwani, how are you?
Very well, thank you. I think, I just want to say on behalf of Parents Council, I think I speak for Sarah and myself when I say thank you to the board, to the administration for putting school supplies on the agenda this year. It's been really important to us. And we're grateful to see that you'll be tackling this year, exploring things like cooperative buying. We would also encourage them to explore other best practices from other districts. Some districts handle school supplies in board policy, doing things like capping the cost of overall lists. This year, our average cost of the elementary school supply lists was around $82, which is high and a burden for many families in our community. So thank you. I will also confirm that toilet paper is not among the offending items on the supply list, but copy paper often is. So we are very grateful that those are coming off the list, and we hope that, by spring of next year, we'll see some rationalized lists that feature only those mission critical items that all students really need in classrooms. That will also make it easier for the HSAs to provide against the need. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, then it's a wrap. We're gonna call it. Thank you guys, and we will see you in October. And hopefully we'll get all these other dates worked out. Great. Go on your way. Enjoy your next meeting. Go and take the word of All right. Why is it cabinet here? Should I have I'm gonna email this. Yeah, email this. And I'm gonna